Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. All right, I am so excited to be sitting here with Coley O'Brien, Chief People Officer from Wendys. I am at the Wendys HQ right now, a place where Coley, he just sleeps on a bed of junior bacon cheeseburgers and spicy chicken sandwiches. Wonderful, wonderful company. Wendys worldwide, if you don't know this, has 6,700 locations worldwide. 900 of those are in more than 40 different countries, over 250,000 employees. 95% of the Wendy's restaurants are franchised, owned, and operated. And Coley, the Chief People Officer at Wendy's, has been with the company for 4,611 days exactly. If you're doing the math, that's almost 13 years. Coley, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Jason. A pleasure to be part of this, and always fun to sit down and talk with you.
Always good to be with you. So 4,611 days. Tell me how you know that and why you know that.
Well, as I get a chance to talk with a lot of our employees around the country, I always talk about my tenure in days versus years because I truly have valued every one of them. And talk a lot about just the pleasure and opportunity to be part of this great brand, to work at this HQ, as you referred to it, which we call our Restaurant Support Center.
Yeah, I love that. Restaurant Support Center. I noticed that when I walked in. I've been here a number of times, but to walk in and see that, I love that language.
Yeah, because truly everybody here is in support of what we believe the people that matter most, which are the people who bring it every day in our restaurants, right? So our general managers and our employees. But as I talk with folks, I've been blessed to have just a phenomenal career at Wendy's. Every job I've had at Wendy's has been the best of my career. And as Chief People Officer, that's one of the things I aspire for all of those 250,000 employees to be able to say is that if not their best jobs, certainly one of them will have been the job or jobs they've had at Wendy's.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, I've been lucky to give a couple of keynote speeches at some of your big events here at Wendy's and get to know you and others at Wendy's. And certainly my connection to you all has been to watch how much you actually care about all of those 250,000 people. So it's awesome to have you on the podcast to be talking about, that stuff doesn't magically happen. If you have 250,000 people around the world, 40 different countries, caring for them and developing people and culture doesn't just magically happen. It has to be intentional. It has to be something that people like you wake up every day and say, how do we care for people so that this is a place that people want to work. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. So I think about, we live right now in a highly distracted world, a world where all of us, and certainly anyone who is an employee, wakes up. And, oh, by the way, the customers that walk into your restaurants are so highly distracted. And so I'm interested from your perspective, why is authentic leadership important? Hopefully it's always important, but I think even more so in that a world that's just so highly distracted.
Yeah, I think a couple things on this. First, we know from research we've done with our employees and what we see in our industry and then what we see broadly that the vast majority of employees want to be part of something that's bigger than the role that they're in, whatever that might be. If I'm, in our case, making sandwiches, running a grill, running a fry station, or it could be, in other industries, people want to be connected with something that's bigger than themselves. And so I think, starting with the leader and how they set the tone for what are we about. And of course, we're about, making great products and delivering great customer service. But we're also about giving something back and treating people with respect. And so how those values come through in the leadership. And, it can't just be the CEO, it can't just be the franchise owner or operator that's delivering against that. And that's where, one of the many important hats that our general managers and our restaurants wear is that, level of being authentic in their leadership. And, you were gracious enough to join us for one of our signature, cultural events of the year, which is our Top GM conference. And, one of the things I've had the opportunity to do is we've done this now for several years. We bring in the best 200 GMs across the Wendy system in a given year and recognize them. And part of that selection process is their leaders writing essentially submitting an application on their behalf if they've met certain criteria as to what makes them stand out, what makes them great. And every year I say, well, I can't possibly read, all of the ones we get, and I end up doing it because they're so compelling. And then, between that and we've actually put these applications through a software system to just see, well, what are the trends or patterns or things that stand out that are common amongst these leaders. And what we've discovered, and what I talk a lot about with our GMs around the system, is that ultimately we think there are 4 common characteristics that we see in all of our great GMs.
Okay.
They're passionate, they're proud, they're caring, and they're committed. And within that, we've identified specific behaviors that support each of those. But as you think about authentic leadership, passionate, proud, caring, committed, those are 4 pretty good things to be top of mind and to see, and we see that show up in these folks every day. And then, I think as I look at our leadership team here at the support center, and as I do research, as I know you do, and you look at, well, what's trending and what are great leaders talking about in terms of what they think has made them great, and the things I'm seeing a lot more of. In leadership traits, two that stand out to me: humility and vulnerability. And I think, from our leadership team standpoint, that's one of the things I see that makes them so great is they exhibit those traits consistently. I think employees want to see that from their leaders, and I think those are more important than maybe they were, 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I echo that same thing. As I see that. Well, one, I love that the fact that you're looking at those trends and you're seeing, well, how is it that we define what does success look like in a GM and those 4 characteristics? But that, something you said quickly, which I think is even more significant, is then that you've taken the time to define what are the behaviors that set that up. I talk a lot about that language drives behavior, and so to be able to, if we can't describe what we want or what success looks like, then we can't be surprised when it doesn't exist. So to be able to describe these are 4 key, traits, but then here are behaviors of how we show up every day to live that way. And I see the same trends that you're saying, that vulnerability and humility are things that, this old model of leadership that we just show up in the world and that the leader's supposed to have all the answers and be foolproofed and has it all figured out is just not true. That people respond to leaders that are able to say, I'm not sure, but let's go on the journey together. And to be humble and to also to be vulnerable and say, here's where I've made mistakes. So, all of that I echo. I'm interested from a chief people officer perspective, what are 1 or 2 of the biggest opportunities, for organizations in today's world, and what are 1 or 2 challenges that you see?
Well, on the opportunity side, one of the things that I just love about our industry, the restaurant industry, is there is so much opportunity for growth. And we talk a lot at Wendy's and with our counterparts that we have an obligation to do more to demonstrate just how opportunistic this industry and this business is. Because, again, one of the great pleasures of my job is getting out into the field. I was just there this week out in Idaho, for example, and meeting with some of the GMs there. And if we were sitting with 8 GMs, the common thread between these would sound like this. I started with Wendy's when I was 16. I needed a first job. planned to do that for a year or through high school, and then had other
It was
plans.
going to be an episodic something.
That's right.
Yeah.
And some went off and then did the thing they thought they wanted to do.
Okay.
Some just discovered that, hey, no, this is the thing I want to do. But in all cases, whether they left or stayed with it, they have all, come back to Wendy's. They've all grown with Wendy's, and now, they're all general managers 5, 6, 7 years into their career, and they're leading teams of 30, 35 people, running $2 million restaurants. And
wow.
In many cases, that wasn't what they were probably thinking about when they were being asked a question in school, like, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Right.
And that is a common thread throughout just about everywhere I travel to.
But they saw opportunity.
They see opportunity.
And they also they see culturally that this is a place that they can grow and that they want to be a part of and that they can have success.
That's right. And the other common thread tends to be that somebody saw something in them that they never saw.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about that something clicked, but also somebody said, you have the potential to run one of these restaurants. You have the potential to be a multi-unit operator. You have the potential to be your own franchise owner operator.
Right.
And what a tremendous, growth opportunity. And so, I get a lot of energy, from that. And then, as you think about challenges, probably consistent if you were to sit down with every other chief people officer or head of HR, in all industries, for me, it would be attracting and retaining great talent.
Yep.
And being able, I think, to lead change effectively. We all know that organizations and businesses are moving and evolving at a more rapid pace than ever before. That is a constant. How do we help our employees stay pace with that? Because change will always be difficult, right?
Yep.
And some of it's really positive, and sometimes it can be more challenging change for the benefit of the organization and business or brand long term. But just continuing to be really disciplined in how we help people navigate through that change, because we all know it's going to be a constant as we grow and evolve our brand.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the segue to that, of retaining talent, finding talent, bringing in talent, and then, like the examples of those people that have grown up through Wendy's. I think it's so interesting that what I'm seeing across industries and organizations and just the trend in the world is that the day and age we live in right now, that people have so many choices, that all of us wake up every single day and we've got choices all over the place. I mean, I remember not too long ago, you and I got together for a beer and just to catch up and to talk about life and connect. And I don't know if you remember this, but we walked into the place where we were meeting and they handed me the list, and it was a list of craft beers to choose from. And there were like 118 of these, different choices of craft beers for me to look at. And so we were handed this. Of all of these things, there's so many choices. If there's something you and I dream up right now of something we want, we type it into Amazon, and we got all these choices of what we want, and we click on the one we want. It shows up on our doorstep. If we want food, we go to Uber Eats or DoorDash or Bite Squad or one of these places, and we hit a button, and whatever we want, they'll bring it to us, right? So we live in this world of choices, and so what I talk about with companies and organizations, in that world more than ever, your culture becomes your competitive advantage. Your culture becomes your competitive advantage because there's so many choices for people. They can go other places. And so if your culture isn't compelling to them, if it isn't engaging their mind and their heart, and they don't see that there's a path forward for them and that they're a part of something greater than themselves, like you talked about, then they'll go somewhere else. I mean, I think Gallup said recently that in their most recent research that 51% of employees in the world right now are actively looking for another job. Because in a world of choices, if they don't like and aren't engaged in their mind and heart, they'll go elsewhere. So I'm interested, how do you see in that, this job of retaining talent, or this challenge of the battle for talent, how do you see culture at Wendy's being that competitive advantage?
Well, the stats you've articulated, the Gallup poll, and we see the same thing, and we know that culture has never been more important when it comes to attracting and retaining talent. And I'll give two examples of just how I think about it. And the first is that I think for a long time we thought about culture as, well, this is the experience that an employee will have over weeks, months, or years with the brand. But what we've also discovered is, for us, the cultural message that we want to signal to employees starts from second one.
That's right.
And oftentimes that means before they've ever come into one of our restaurants, at least as an employee.
No doubt.
So we've put a lot of work this year into rejuvenating our employment branding message, how that shows up on our career site, because we know that when people are thinking about an opportunity with Wendy's, they're likely thinking about opportunities with many of our competitors.
That's right.
With retailers, with other similar and like jobs. And so if they don't know us as an employer, they're going to seek out that information. Well, how do we show up, and how do we bring our culture to the forefront from second one? And that comes through in our website. It needs to come through in the application process that they're being asked to fill out. And so I think we're taking a much more holistic approach of what that means in terms of the cultural signals that we're sending, not from when you start, on day one, but well before that.
Yeah, the brand experience begins from the moment I even know, well, who the heck is Wendy's?
And probably visually, even before that, because hopefully you've come in as a customer first.
That's right.
So you may be forming a perspective on, well, what would it be like to work, or could I see myself working here? And of course, we always say the customer experience will never exceed the employee experience. So we need to make sure that that's being demonstrated in our restaurants. But I think all of that is formative for respective employees who we might want to recruit in, and then. The other thing I've talked a lot about both here and out in the field, and you kind of hinted at it, is I want Wendy's to be known as a great place to start, a great place to build, and a great place to spend a career. And we can be that for all three of those types of folks. And I think historically, the mindset, at least here at Wendy's, was, if you're a Wendy's employee, that's a forever thing. And if you were to leave, well, then that's bad. You need to be part of the brand. Why would you want to go anywhere else? And of course, I want to attract or retain talent for as long as we possibly can. But the reality is, people do have choices, and in some cases, it makes sense for people to come and have a great experience with Wendy's, give us their best for 3 years, and then take those learnings and that development and move on to another opportunity. And hopefully they'll continue to be great, lifelong, brand ambassadors and customers of Wendy's. And a lot of times they end up coming back to Wendy's.
Yeah, I was going to say, it works both ways. There's also, you also understand that there's a season of an employee experience somewhere else too. They may start here, they may go somewhere else, and they may have another experience and then realize they want to come back.
That's right.
That now, whatever they've learned or however they've grown, or, oh, by the way, the grass isn't always greener somewhere else. I want to come back, and now I'm ready for the next phase of development, whatever that may be in my life.
And I think the other thing that we have, it's both an opportunity and an obligation for us, and I think our competitors as well. For so many of our restaurant employees, this is their first job, and so we need to create a great experience for them at Wendy's and help develop them. But we're developing life skills. So much of what we need to be training and developing are things that they should be able to export to other companies or future career paths that they aspire to. And that's an important part of what we should be doing in our restaurants every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So part of that, now the brand experience beginning, I love that, is that because it's absolutely true. It begins way before anybody then even interviews. But from that interview, from that then eventually the hiring process to then day one, and then certainly moving through that, again, I talk about language driving behavior, and I know that the power and the clarity around values. And so in a world of choices, part of the competitive advantage, not just because you want it to be an advantage, but because you need to understand, how are you unique? How is your organization authentically you? How is Wendy's authentically Wendy's and not somebody else? And part of that is, can you articulate the values that are truly rooted? And we've talked about at the GM conference, the franchise conference, and other things. It's not just about having a poster on the wall. It's about your posters being in your people.
Yeah.
And so from that first brand experience through the development of those, the clarity and then the utilization of values as not a poster but a tool is so important in the culture shaping world. And so, how has Wendy's used the values, again, not just for a competitive advantage, but because it's authentically you, as a tool rather than just a poster?
Yeah. Well, first, I think we're blessed as an organization to have had a founder in Dave Thomas who set and established 5 clear values, maybe not from day one, but certainly early on in our brand history. And those have stayed true for, through his leadership and for the leaders beyond and for us as an organization. So, when I started day one, 4,610 days ago, those values were the same, right?
Yeah.
It starts with quality is our recipe. And you see that on every cup and bag and sandwich, wrapper that you get in our restaurants. And then treating people with respect, doing the right thing, giving something back. And because we are in a business, profit means growth. Those are our 5 values. And you've seen them on our wall and our lobby.
Which they got to be on the wall, by the way. Again, I don't mean to say they shouldn't be, because we need to hold those out in front of us.
Yeah.
But the best places in the world, the best teams and organizations are the ones that not only is it in front of us and we hold that in front of us because where we look is where we go, but every single day then we say, how do we breathe life into that? How do we breathe oxygen into, if that's what's going to steer not just what we do, but how we do it, how are we going to show up to do that every single day?
That's right. And those give us a great place to anchor, the business. We talk a lot about the what and the how. So the what are the great business results we want to drive and the great customer experience, but equally important is the how. And the how is all about those 5 values and how we bring those to life through our behaviors and through our leadership every day. And so, so fortunate. It makes my job easier as the Chief People Officer. I don't have to be out with our employees and our franchise system reminding everybody, about the values. You couldn't go, probably 10 minutes in a conversation with,
without somebody
most of our franchisees or GMs when you ask about culture and not reinforcing those 5, core values. And so that's a great place of strength for us. And then it's our obligation, again, to make sure that we're continually demonstrating that through our leadership behaviors.
No doubt. Every time you demonstrate it, it anchors it more deeply in the culture, that it just becomes, that's the way we do it.
That's right.
That's the way we think, act, and interact every single day. So I'm asked this all the time. What do you think employees are seeking these days, and especially when you think about generational differences and maybe the different mindsets that people are always asking me, how are the different generations thinking? What is it that you're observing? What do employees want these days?
Well, we're interesting, maybe to some industries from a generational standpoint. We're often a first chance job. And we're often, for some, their last job.
That's right.
So we've got people in their teens, and we have people in their 80s, and everything in between who are working in our restaurants. And so there definitely are multiple generations that are represented, but. We did a lot of research actually this year. I mentioned this new employment branding and focus. We had the opportunity to talk to over 3,000 people, some of whom work for us and some who work for our competitors, and ask them, why would they come and work for us? Why do they stay for us? Or why would they, leave someplace else to come work for us? And what are the things that matter most? And there were 5 things that really stood out as value, or what's important to employees today that we need to make sure we're hitting the mark. It's not any one particular thing, because we can have all of these represented in any given restaurant. But the 5 things were, first off, being paid fairly, which we know is important, and particularly in our restaurants. We want to make sure that folks feel like they're being compensated appropriately for the work that they're doing. Flexibility, consistency, being part of a fast and fun-paced environment, and then the 5th one was being part of an inclusive environment. And so those 5 things are what we're talking a lot about with our restaurant teams, to say, hey, if you want to attract and retain the type of talent that we know you can get and need to get, you need to be making sure that you're hitting the mark on those 5 areas. And then, as you translate that to what I see here with what we call our above restaurant employees, both here at the support center and the field, I think those are all still relevant, but something like flexibility might mean different things. So for example, in a restaurant, flexibility often means I need to have hours and a schedule that I can work around the other things I'm managing in my life. And so if you can give me those hours and provide that flexibility, I'd love to come be part of your brand and your organization. I think here at the support center, we're hearing more from employees today about flexibility in terms of, is there an opportunity to work from home? Or can I have a different flexible work arrangement where I believe I can still be a high-performing, contributor, be part of the team, but that may not mean I'm, in my office or in at the support center 5 days a week. And that's a new,
that's a new
way of working that we're starting to figure out. How do we be more progressive in that area? Because we know we're going to need to be to continue to retain and attract the type of talent we want to.
Absolutely, yeah, not just in the restaurants, but in the corporate and every role throughout the company, to be thinking about those. I mean, I'm asked all the time about these generational differences, and I speak about it in a number of ways, and have team members of mine that also work with organizations that way, of understanding that the generational differences have always been there. Every generation you go back, there's different mindsets, but what is evolving right now, especially, is that people, and I heard you saying it loudly and clearly, is people want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. They want to know that they are included and that they are contributing to it. But they also want to know, but I also want to know that the place wants to partner with me for the life that I want to have. And how can we work together to maybe shake up a little bit the conventions of work, to do it so that it maximizes the life I want to have, not just the work I want to have. And so it's been a challenge, certainly, for many organizations, but the most innovative are the ones, I think, that are stepping back and asking the question of, okay, well, what is that life that we're trying to build for our employees? And oh, by the way, continue to be the best in the world at whatever we do. And that's a difficult thing to do, but the best are asking those questions.
And I think the best are being very progressive and evolving their approach to however you define a traditional work day, career path, etc. I think the best are demonstrating that they can be more flexible in catering to more individual needs and demands, and those are good things. We ultimately, those are the things that will make the difference, I believe, with engagement. We haven't talked about that, but we do a lot to measure employee engagement, and I think those are big drivers, right? If we're meeting them where they need to be in terms of, again, whatever they're managing outside of their time with Wendy's, we know that carries a huge impact in their desire to stay with us as a brand, that we recognize them as a whole individual. And we're an important part of their life to achieve the successes they want, both in work and outside of work.
Yeah, absolutely. If we're not engaging their mind and heart, and they're not engaged, again, they'll go somewhere else.
That's right.
And so, as we've talked about at the GM conference, and then also your franchise conference, is that we have to take the temperature. We have to take the temperature and figure out what the engagement is, and then the best are the ones that then say, from that, how are we going to then set the temperature we want, and shift from that kind of thermometer thinking to that thermostat of saying, all right, well, how do we improve that and raise the level of engagement throughout our entire organization? I told a story at the end of actually both those conferences. At the end of my keynote, I told a story about my wife's grandmother. And I shared this, it's so great to get to share this, that there was a stretch of her life. Her grandma's now in her 80s, and so not anymore, but there was a stretch in her life where for over 20 plus years, she went to the same Wendy's every single day. And when I shared that, it was awesome, because I swear there was like confetti that dropped from the ceiling, and you all had won. You'd captured a customer for life. I mean, it was an amazing thing. But of course, I won't tell the full story, but what was amazing is, I understood this story that every day she'd go to the same Wendy's and she'd get the same thing every time, a Diet Coke. And as I would question her that there are plenty of other places to get Diet Coke, why are you doing that every day? I shared with them that her answer was revealing that, of course, it wasn't about Diet Coke. She wasn't coming to Wendy's every day just to get Diet Coke, because there's other places to get it. But she said, they're my people, and they know my name. And what I shared with those groups is that, you think over the course of those 20 years, the staff at that particular Wendy's has turned over. I know that there's been a great retention, and I'm sure people have grown and developed into other roles. But I'm guessing at that restaurant over the course of 20 years, there'd been some turnover. And yet from the handoff from an employee to employee, along the way, somewhere there was a culture of caring that was built and a temperature that they were setting every single day of not just what we do, but how we do it. And it became this place for my wife's grandmother that every day is a place that they knew my name and I felt welcomed and I wanted to go out of my way to go see them.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just an amazing, amazing thing. And so when I shared that, it was awesome. And actually, at the end of the conference, the first time ever in the history of any keynotes that I've given, I think I did about 70 or so keynotes last year, just last year alone. And so over the course of the last decade, this has never happened other than one time, and it was at your GM conference when at the end of my, my keynote, and they were doing some question and answer from the crowd. Miguel from Puerto Rico not only got the mic, but came up on the stage, and it was a beautiful moment of him really speaking to all his peers. I mean, he runs, I think, one of the restaurants in Puerto Rico, and was a passionate plea about the topic and the things we were talking about that day. But, really, he was almost like a passionate speech to his other GMs about the power of culture and leadership. What was that moment like for you?
Well, I know it was special for you. It was certainly special for us, and a moment we still talk a lot about because it was just one of those rare, unique moments in time. And the backstory there, at that time, Puerto Rico had, I think, recently been devastated by some storms and hurricanes, and so they're rebuilding their communities and teams. And this young man had the opportunity to be one of our top GMs, and he's experiencing this. You may remember English was not his first language, so he had a translator helping him through the whole conference. And in fact, when he came on stage, so did the translator, and so he said the message through another partner. But if I recall, his message was really, again, the obligation that he felt, and he was sharing amongst that 200 group of GMs to say, we're hearing these great messages from Jason and from the leadership team, and it's our obligation to then go back to our restaurants and to our teams and carry that message forward so they can be here next year or in years to come. And it's examples like that just make those parts of our business and our culture so special. And we're so fortunate to have your wife's grandmother as a loyal customer for years, and we've got a lot of those around the country, and I get to hear these stories. And we had a moment now several years ago, what we call now the umbrella moment. Everybody knows what that means, but we had an older woman who was getting her food and had eaten in our dining room, and then was trying to get back to her car, and it's pouring rain, and so she didn't have an umbrella with her. And so one of our employees instinctively, goes outside, grabs an umbrella from a patio, opens it up and holds it over her to walk out to her car.
One of the umbrellas from the patio.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And that became, what is now, we refer to as umbrella moments. And so that's, a really interesting, simple thing. These are simple things.
And that was an employee at the restaurant.
Took action.
That's phenomenal.
Knowing people's names. And then, the other one I'll just share quickly is, I was out in a GM rally about a month ago, and I always want to ask GMs, like, hey, how'd you get into this, and what's kept you here? And so when you think about the leadership we can invoke not just with customers but with our employees, she went on to tell me that she started in our restaurants when she was in high school, lost her parents while she was in high school, and so when she went to our high school graduation, the one person that was there to represent her was her general manager. And that was 20 years ago. And today she's the GM, and she's working for that, now GM who's now the DM, the district manager. And you think that might be rare, but you just hear these stories, over and over again. And it's what, and I'm sure they are true in other organizations, but I hear it a lot in brand Wendys. And those are the things that, make it special, make it a special culture, and, make me want to continue to be a big part of it and hopefully be able to contribute in some way, to that culture as well, so we can have more of those moments.
Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing moment. Well, thank you, man. I'm lucky I get to go and do this and be in and out of so many different companies and organizations around the world and get to see leadership teams and cultures in action, and to learn what places are doing well, and where they're struggling, and all that. And I'll just say it's been fun to watch what you're doing at Wendy's. Yeah. It's fun to see, not only are you just really good at what you do, but the fact that you bring care to people, and that you guys are really trying to think innovatively about caring for people is a really great thing. So thank you. I love your commitment to caring for people, and it's been fun to get to know you. So thanks.
And thank you. You've been a huge part of some of our big cultural events, and the feedback's been phenomenal. And I didn't mention this, but when I'm out in restaurants talking to GMs, I've had 2 instances this year where they were showing me our values on a poster in the restaurant, and specifically said, "They're not just words on a wall, Coley. We're demonstrating them every day," and that came from you. So thank you for your partnership with Wendys, and we've really enjoyed how you've helped us, grow and think bigger about culture as well.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.